So Bitcoin is making history today. If you're watching this video, you're actually watching some historic price action with Bitcoin. And so we'll go ahead and get into what this is and how it's only done this a couple of times in the history of the asset being on the market. And what does this mean for crypto? What does this mean for price right now? So let's go ahead, and unless you're on vacation or your power went out or you lost your phone, you probably know that Bitcoin has dumped quite a bit here over the past few weeks. In fact, it's dumped around 30% here just in the past 3 weeks alone, which is quite substantial. From around 97K, we're down to around 62K right now. And of course, from the all-time high, we're down around 50%, 52%, 50% from the all-time high, which is quite a massive drop in just over 4 months. And so really what that means for Bitcoin is if you look at the RSI, the relative strength index, which really shows you the speed, the momentum of buying and selling of an asset. And you can look at it, whether it's the daily, whether it's the weekly, and this is the daily chart. And if I were to show you this, if you can't see down here in the purple, it's at 15.4. Now, if I were to go ahead and extend that line 15.5 across the history of Bitcoin, you're going to notice that it tapped it back in during the COVID crash, okay, here down the COVID crash. So that was a big time in all markets because all markets crashed then substantially. And it also happened back during the sell-off in 2018 to 2019 there during November, during that Thanksgiving time to Christmas. But it sold off quite a bit there after going sideways for months back in 2018, and that marked the bottom, okay? And this also marked the bottom as far as the local bottom during the COVID crash. If you look at the stock market right now, what are you going to notice? Oh, we're basically just off all-time highs. So for stocks, we're not looking at a bear market. We're not looking at a big downtrend in every market. We're seeing that specifically when it comes to Bitcoin and crypto. Every market's different, and they're going to rhyme a little bit, but you can expect them all to be the same. So when I tell you this information, you can't necessarily say, okay, we've had that twice in the past 10 years in the history of Bitcoin, therefore this has to be the bottom. No. What this can be, though, is a bounce. And so I do expect Bitcoin to bounce after drawing down this rapidly, this fast. And so we'll get into here in a moment maybe what caused this. But let's go ahead and look at the fear and greed index. And so what we can see from there is that if you can't see here on the left-hand side, we're at a 12 for the fear and greed index, which is quite low. Historically, that's not the lowest we've been. We've actually been sub 10. We've been at 5 and 6. And I love this chart. You can find this fear and greed chart because this is a historical chart that's not just the past year, but it's actually the past decade here or so. But what you're going to notice, it's super easy to read. If it's a red dot or dark orange dot, it's high in fear, right? There's extreme fear in the market. If it's a bright green dot, it's extreme greed. And typically when you have extreme greed, it tends to mark the tops or before a sell-off. And if you have high in fear, extreme fear, it tends to mark bottoms or a bounce. Now, right now, we're currently at a 12, as I said earlier. Now, historically, that does not mean that it's necessarily, quote, the bottom. If you want to take an example of this, just go back to last cycle. We had the Luna, Three Arrows Capital, fear and capitulation there where things sold off and we had a contagion in the market and fear actually dropped to 6. And price dropped from around 30. Actually, it started around all-time high 67. Then it went to 46K. It dropped substantially from there to 19K, over 50% sell-off. But then, even at a 6, the market needed to correct. It needed a mean reversion, and it needed a short-term bounce. And so that bounced from around 19,000 up to around 24,000. So that, what is that? 20, 30% bounce there that we got for Bitcoin, but that was not the bottom. Even though this was a 6, it didn't, the fear, extreme fear, did not mark the actual bottom. What it did say is we needed to bounce. And so after that 20 to 30% bounce, we continued to have accumulation, maybe some more selling off, but then the FTX, of course, that dropped us back from 21K down to 15K. Now, I don't necessarily think we're going to have a contagion like that again. People will speculate on whether MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor could be that. quite possibly could be. Can't predict the future, but what I want to tell you is that we did not get a lower fear, extreme fear, than we did after that price at 19K, even though price went lower. So this can actually be a local bottom. Bitcoin can bounce and can actually go lower, even though the extreme fear index is not as low as it is here, is what I'm trying to tell you. So I do expect Bitcoin to potentially bounce right here. It's looking ugly at 61K. If we want to go ahead and also look at the weekly chart too, I mean, if you look at the weekly historically, here we're 25 on the RSI. If we were to mark that on 25, 26 or so, we've only seen that hit a couple of times historically. And actually, historically, it hit there back in 2022. Again, same time, the contagion of Luna, the contagion of Three O's Capital. And of course, we had a bounce after that. And then we did hit more of a bottom. And as you notice, that RSI actually went higher. That marked the bottom for RSI. Even though price bounced and went lower, the RSI actually went slightly higher. Understand that we can get a bounce here, and it's to be expected sooner rather than later. For me personally, I'm not the one who would be shorting here because the time to short was actually up at 90K. Not at 60K, okay? Some more shorts pile in from retail traders, and then we could possibly see a short squeeze to bounce up. You also, though, just understand, too, that you can't get tricked by that because some people can actually go short while they're buying to hedge their buys. And so just because you see the OI go up and you're thinking, oh, all these people are shorting now, be a big short squeeze, they could be buying as well and just hedging with that. And so you just have to understand that that's the case. But what I can tell you is if I'm trading using leverage, I'm not going short here. And if anything, to buy spot to dollar cost average, not necessarily a bad thing to do, as I talked about in the last video. But just understand that based on the fear, based on historically what we're doing with price action, that it's going to likely bounce sooner rather than later. Historically, that's what it tells us, right? This is a wicked red candle on the weekly chart, especially to have an RSI so low both on the weekly. Now, you're going to also see other things such as the fall, like the stocks, some aren't hitting as far as that goes. So maybe there's some fear with Amazon and fear with some of these huge tech stocks of the Mag 7 not meeting their numbers as far as their earnings go. So again, you could have maybe some aftermarket sell-off there from the stock market. But in general, what you can see as well, too, is I think there's some good explanatory what's happening. And really, it goes back down to since October of 2025. At that time, we had massive liquidations in the market. And really, nothing has been the same. We had total liquidation charts that just went through the roof, just record-breaking. And a lot of people will say that the market broke then. It has not been the same. And so we do know that there are a lot of big players that were hurt then, in that we can even see as prices go down now that there's potential winding down or selling off or liquidating what Bitcoin or what crypto they have left. So there's a lot of structural decline that's going on. And as far as that goes, the available capital to absorb, it's not as high as it should be if you want this price to hold. What I'm just trying to tell you here is that we can actually see this historically. Is this a bottom? It could be. Again, I think these guys at the Kobayashi letter, the answer to this question, is this the bottom, is when structural liquidity is restored, right? This will be a combination of both capitulation in price and leverage, as well as maximum bearish sentiment. And we could somewhat potentially be in that area right now, as we've seen historically when it comes to Bitcoin as we go up in that area. Again, when it comes to these types of things, I don't think we're quite there yet as far as, quote, a bottom, but a potential need for a bounce, definitely. I think that as far as whoever this is selling off, this big player, fund, whatever you want to say, but it looks like somebody definitely has been selling off almost methodically here, just walking price down here. If you want to go ahead and look hourly by hour, just kind of walking it down. And so is it a matter of time until we see actually somebody jump in? And that's all the market is. And so the market for Bitcoin or any asset is an auction. When do buyers step in? Because there's a lot of arguments right now. Let's go ahead and look at the EMAs, and you can look at SMAs as well. Let's go to the weekly, right? So the weekly, you can argue that as far as the EMA goes, that has not been historically a bottom. It's basically the simple moving average, this blue line here, historically prior to last cycle, that this is marked always the bottom. Of course, price can go through, but it has held that. Only the last cycle did we see that break, price go sideways from that for, close to a year or so before it broke above that. As far as that goes, we're about back down to that SMA, which is at 58K. And so can we see sellers step into there? You can also go to the monthly as well, too. That's actually at 56. I want to go ahead and look at the EMA where that's at. It's actually below that. But definitely, if we were to go ahead and look, that would probably also be a place where a lot of people would buy. Historically, we've seen that also was a place that held. Of course, not in the last market, bear market, of course, it broke below that, but could be potentially a place where people would buy. But if we look also, too, at fib levels as well, we're also reaching a confluence of basically being at the here on the 0.618, as far as that goes, at a potential buying opportunity. It looks like that is actually around 58K. So you have some confluence from fib levels in these moving averages here on the monthly, on the weekly. You've got some confluence there at 58K. So for me personally, if I am somebody who is dollar cost averaging and I'm looking for a risk reward that is, quote, maybe more of a better risk reward, naturally, when it comes to risk reward, you want to buy dips. That is common sense. But again, a lot of people want to buy on these uptrends, right? Historically, those are the places that we've already seen is that these are the best buying opportunities when it comes to Bitcoin. And right now, we're at those extreme fear levels. And confluence-wise as well, too, we're actually getting close to a major confluence, whether that be multiple moving averages on different time frames, on the fib levels here at 58K to 60K. For me personally, if I'm looking to dollar cost average into crypto and Bitcoin specifically, I would expect there would be some type of bounce unless we hear some type of crazy news come out from whether it's strategy or whether it's from some of these DATs, these digital asset treasuries that are broken and maybe they're liquidated. Maybe something like that could come out. And really, you and I tend to be later to the party. We're not always the insiders. We're not always the ones that know or see these things, that when things break or when things happen, a lot of times it's easy to be late to the party and be the last to know. And of course, there's always a narrative that follows price. And so I wouldn't be shocked to hear that something comes out that some type of digital asset treasury is in trouble or strategy or something potentially. We do know that even with the Epstein files, had a relation with Bitcoin. There are apparently transactions with that. But let's be honest, right? As far as it comes to any type of financial crimes, those have primarily been in fiat, mostly in human history. And typically, that's what you tend to see when it comes to that. But a lot of what I'm trying to say is that you'll see narratives as far as negativity when it comes to Bitcoin and when it comes to these types of things when price is down that come out later. But just know that overall, that if you're somebody who dollar cost averaging, it seems like this is just a magnet, this 58K level, that I think could be potentially be a good opportunity. Structurally as well, too, if we go ahead and if I were to mark a structure for Bitcoin, let me go ahead and get out a marker here. So if you go ahead and look right here at this blue line, structurally, this has been a heavy support level here on the daily and weekly chart as far as it goes when it comes to around the high 50K level. So again, not looking to necessarily trade and go heavy and leverage long here, but just understanding that when you're looking at levels of opportunity of risk reward, that this area of around 60 to 58K tends to be a really good opportunity technically and fundamentally when it comes to Bitcoin if you are a believer in Bitcoin long term, like I am, like many people are. But with that said, just understanding it, we're approaching a level of extreme fear that I do think, even if this is not the bottom, to really hit that home, that it is likely that we're going to see some type of bounce in the coming days to weeks when it comes to Bitcoin from these current levels. So hopefully that's helpful information. A lot of things are down. Gold and silver and metals are down from their all-time high. They nuked pretty hard. We have not yet seen stocks really hit too hard, but understanding that some of these earnings are coming out, they're not hitting their marks, and there's no reason why we can't continue to see prices of stocks go down, especially if they're not hitting earnings. And as we know, typically if stocks go down, if people are going into risk, are buying risk on assets, especially if they're selling stocks, then that can continuously affect the price of Bitcoin, and that could actually lead to a lower down. So again, not saying that this can't go lower. I'm saying there should be some type of balance to be expected around this area. And even if you buy this area of 58K, doesn't mean that you can't sell it. That maybe you then say, okay, if I'm going to buy this area, if it goes a little lower, then I can let it go, cut it, and then get back in when I think that there is some strength in the market. And now that's the thing that you can do as well too. A lot of times if you're looking for strength, you can wait till that RSI does bounce that we saw earlier. You can wait until you see some strength in there. But again, you're not going to get the most return of your buys when it comes to that as far as a trade goes. But if you're dollar cost averaging, if you're looking to hold Bitcoin for many years to come, if you do think that Bitcoin is going to hit 100, 200K again, then yes, I do believe that buying at an opportune time like this, where extreme fear is in the market, where we've seen a massive 30% drawdown here just in the last week or in a few weeks, then again, it presents the best opportunity. And that's what we want to do, is trying to buy these best opportunities when most people don't want to buy Bitcoin and crypto is when we want to buy. So hopefully that's good information, what to watch for as far as that goes. I think that's bottom line. It's a scary time to buy Bitcoin, but this is nothing new. We've seen these 50% drawdowns plenty of times over the history of Bitcoin. History tells us that these are always the best times to buy. So with that said, you guys, hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll continue to make some videos like this. Just wanted to break it down. And you guys trade safe, and I will see you on the next one.